Hi, everyone, and welcome to the We All Suffer podcast. I'm Cam Straw, and in this episode, I'm joined by two of my best friends, Remy Chabot-Maheen and Nate Baker. We talk about the show Severance and how it's all about grief and corporate America. Spoiler alert, we're definitely going to talk about specifics from both seasons, so if you haven't finished or been caught up to episode 9 of season 2, then hold off on this listen or this watch, and I hope you enjoy this conversation about Severance. And this is a video podcast. It's up on YouTube too, so if you're just listening and want to see my goofy transitional Severance elevator impression that I just did, then that's where you can watch that. And if you're a fan of the show, please like and subscribe and leave a review. It makes a big difference on reach. So thank you and enjoy the show. Thank you guys for coming on. This is awesome. This is the dream come true, as I said over text. I'm like, get the besties on one recording. This is nice. So we want to talk about Severance. The main thing that I caught right away in the show was this is definitely about people not trying to deal with grief. And then it was cool because I don't know if you guys know this, but there's a Severance companion podcast to the show. It's, Ben
Mm.
Stiller
Cool.
and they bring on Adam Scott, all these different actors from the show. I've only listened to like one episode, but in that episode they brought on Darren Erickson as the writer creator of the show, and funny enough, he talks about why and how he created it, and he started writing it when he worked at a office that was essentially a door factory, just like the episode, if you remember, there's an episode where I think Dylan in the show is, when they leave and they're like fired,
Oh,
he's at a door factory and trying to do an
what?
interview. And so this dude actually worked at a door factory. I thought that was crazy. So there was a nod to that real life thing, but he hated that job so much essentially that he thought about, man, if I could just blast to 5 o'clock, wouldn't that be great? And that was the impetus for the show.
Mm,
And so
hmm.
great idea. And there's a lot of inspiration from some of my favorite. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is one of my favorite movies. And there's a lot of connection to that as well. And they talk about that. And then even Adam Scott, who plays Mark, I believe that's his name, the actor, he said,
Marco.
yeah, so he said in an interview that the show is about grief and coming to terms with grief. So he's admitted that. So that's not just in my head, right? But because all the main
Yeah.
characters, there's a reason they're wanting to sever. And crazy enough, too, though, one more backstory was he admitted, Adam Scott said that he actually just lost his mom like the year before, a couple months before shooting. And I think Ben Stiller did the year before, lost somebody really close to him too. So that's crazy. And so he said that he was grieving while filming this, and filming this helped him to actually grieve because they were also filming during COVID and all this stuff. But because the character was grieving, it made him actually come to terms with losing his mom and actually, feeling
Mm.
that in that process. So I thought that was really interesting. But that's what the show's about. Um, it's a lot. It's about a lot more than that too. But I wanted us to focus on mostly that. We can get into some of the other crazy parts of it and how that
Yeah,
resonates.
because that wasn't what I thought of first when I saw
Yeah.
it. You
You
know?
didn't come up for you.
Same here.
Well, what do you,
No, no, I mean, it definitely does. Like once you say it, it like makes me start thinking about a lot of different things. But that wasn't my first thought, probably because I'm unpacking all this stuff about just like, systems and how systems just the shadiness that can happen as things get bigger and bigger and ulterior motives and how you use people and but
Yeah.
it kind of speaks to grief a little bit in that that's like um you're just so much easier to manipulate when you're grieving,
mm,
when you have these deep needs and people know that, they can play to that. And it's harder to kind of like stand on your own 2 feet if you haven't really dealt with your grief. But anyway, but yeah, that wasn't what first came to mind when I thought about it though.
yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. What about you, Nate? Did you catch?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's like the whole corporate thing, the whole
Mhm.
corporation, right? And like, in this age in which we're living in, where all these institutions have been dismantled, like the two institutions that still stand are like politics and like work in a way. And so like thinking about the workplace and especially these startups, mission led, these founder stories, right? And you have this whole story of the founder and this ethos and all these
Like they're
values.
gods, you know? Yeah.
Exactly. And it's just kind of like, and then even just, I think for me, I can just relate to the aspect of like going into a job that I feel like I have to leave part of myself at the door and like play a
Mhm.
role. And so that idea of like splitting your personality, which, in this case, is like a physical thing. I feel like I've experienced like emotionally going into places and like, okay, I can't fully show up as myself. I have to be the Nate version for
Mm,
this
Yeah.
office
Yeah.
environment.
yeah.
So,
Yep.
No, I can relate to that. I totally caught that too. And we're gonna actually get into that. The corporate, I want to talk about the corporate craziness and the global powers that be and oppressive systems. And well, I figured you guys have a couple things to say about it too. Yeah, I, I think that's a huge, obvious theme in the show as
Yeah.
well, and definitely something
Yeah.
we're all supposed to pick up on. I think the modernity kind of piece, there's a lot of interesting parts of the show, but the thing that Nate, I can relate to what you're saying too, in terms of like, I'm curious about your guys' work experience. I've worked like 27 different jobs in my life, and not a lot of crazy big corporate stuff, but a little bit. Um, but I do relate to that, the creator's vision in terms of why he wrote, in terms of like wanting to teleport to 5 o'clock, or just even being in school, especially in high school. I hated it. In elementary school, I just was waiting for lunch break or waiting for
Yeah.
Friday.
hmm
Everybody's working for the weekend type thing, and
Yeah.
yep.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, and so I think that
Well, no,
go for it.
I can share something, man. Like one of the so I was for like 8 years, I was a dean of students at East Palo Alto Academy, the high school, and I was trying to institute this concept called restorative justice, where one of the tenets of it is that there's just so many layers to our students and what they're going through, and oftentimes how they act is just like a representation of something so much deeper. And this started like the whole journey of like understanding it, like to your point, Nate, I feel like that separation and feeling like you can't bring your full self, that starts in school for young kids, right?
hmm
And so I thought about one of my friends who I grew up with. His mom got cancer when he was a junior, when we were juniors, and he told me about it, and I could tell he was struggling with it. But strong football player, didn't have a dad, so he just felt like he had to be the strong man of the house. But obviously grieving, right? Comes to school with his headphones into one of the classrooms. Teacher tells him, "Take your headphones out." He's like, "Whatever," and I'm like, "Uh oh," you know.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I felt like I was watching. I was like, I just want to tell her like he's going through something. Just let him have
Yeah.
his headphones in. She starts going again, and of course he's not in the mood. He puts it back in. She blasts him in front of everybody. He talks back in front of everybody. Ooh, the class
hmm
goes. She kicks him out of class, sends him home. Right? No, I'm sorry, sends him to the office. He gets down to the office. He told me later he got into it with the principal, got suspended. And I noticed from that moment on this like decline. And I was like,
hmm
dang, had only she just known this dude just found out his mom had cancer, this whole thing would go differently. But what that makes it like the connection I feel like to the show is I've seen kids grieve, and sometimes I think it would be better for them if they could just sever and leave their junk at home and show up just to like learn, because that's what we expect of them.
Mm,
Like, just don't bring all your other stuff. I know you're going through a lot. I know something just happened with your uncle. I know your grandma just died. I know you're feeling heck, but just can you come to work and get your job done?
mm
And how much harder is school? How much harder is work when you have so much going on, and you're grieving,
yeah.
and there's like no place for it at work? There really is kind of like this expectation that you should be severed. You know what I mean? Like, you don't bring that junk into here, bro. Don't nobody want to
Well,
hear about that. Just
that's
get your
the,
work done.
that's
You
an
know?
interesting observation and a great story, because I feel like that is. American society that is the society we live in. There is it's this compartmentalization that's expected of everybody. And I've had experiences too that brought up that for me, not that I was going through that exact thing, but I remember being in a job, and I don't want to say what it is because you guys will know, but there was a job where they actually helped me through a series of conversations to figure out, this is my early 20s, that I had depression because I had had an anxiety attack or something in my early 20s. And my boss essentially was like, "Oh, you should go get that looked at," like, and I did, and turns out I got diagnosed, and it was a whole like revelatory thing for me, and they were really cool about it at first. They like let me like kind of be in the office, read books and stuff. But then they ended up letting me go a month later. So I thought it was really cool until they fired me. And then I was like, did they fire me because I got diagnosed with depression and they think I'm not emotionally available anymore for this job? Because it was a job mentoring, kids and whatnot. And so I'm just
Mhm.
like, so that, but I think, and there's been many
Mm,
different instances where I've been in jobs where kind of the true colors of the organization or the establishment and my
Yeah.
managers, my bosses
yeah.
comes out once they find out I'm leaving, or when they find out when things get real, in my life, like it exposes kind of where they're really at, and where the line is drawn there, or where that severance or needs to happen, or where they expect it to happen. And
Yeah.
it's
Hmm.
cold, and it's
Yeah.
sad because just like that story you told about that student, I don't think people are equipped to know how to deal with emotions. And it should, because also if there was a blending, I feel like there could be, like you said, you saw it unravel when that could have been helped. And that kid, his whole life trajectory and even his school performance, ironically, would have probably improved had they just maybe had a heart, had some compassion. And yeah, it's really sad to see that.
That's the cold-blooded nature, right? You start young. These kids, oh, teachers, I care about you. I care about you. I care
Hmm.
about you. And then you leave and they just keep on teaching. They're not thinking about you no more. Like it's kind of an introduction to a really cold world where
Mm.
we've created these systems that are so based on outcomes and not based on people and caring about people. I mean, think about in Severance, right? The first dude who was in their first couple episodes, I think Petey,
Oh,
right?
Yeah, PD. Yeah.
Right? Like when he left, they had the pictures where they were like, "Oh, we're here," and then they just like take him out the picture.
He's gone.
New, we got a new person. Retake a picture. That's on your desk now. Don't think about this dude no more. You know what I mean? And that I feel like is part of what makes grieving, in a general sense, really difficult because you're never taught how to do it. Where's the like safe place to really grieve? And you get all
Hmm.
these places who tell you, "Oh, we're this," and I've always kind of felt some type of way when corporations said like, "We're like a family." I'm like,
Yes, I was gonna say
"We're like
that.
a family, and you're gonna fire me and never talk to me again." Like, my family wouldn't do that to me. So, no, you're like my boss. Let's just,
Let's
um,
keep it 100. Yeah.
let's keep it 100. You know what I
I
mean? So
wanted
anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
oh, go for it, Nate. But I just think that's interesting to just comment real quickly because it makes me think about Google and Apple and these big organizations that they expect you to live your whole life within this ecosystem. And so they want to bring you in,
Hmm.
but yet there is a line, right? And I think we're okay. It seems weird, at least a lot of us are okay giving away a bunch of freedom and a bunch of time from our real family to this organization at what cost, right? We're sacrificing, and then it's not it doesn't go both ways, especially in the bigger corporations. I
Yeah.
feel like it's like the amount we give compared to what's really given. When stuff really hits the fan in our life, I think it shows up, and their true colors come out. So yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's interesting that we're starting on more of like an institutional, organizational standpoint. Because I think when you introduce the idea of grief, it's like, okay, like Mark is grieving, right? Like he's lost his wife, or this person is grieving because this is going on in their life. But I think we're hitting on like a real theme of like there's two angles to the story, right? Like to your point, Remy, like a lot of American institutions, starting from education through to your workplace experience, are all focused on outcomes, productivity, like KPIs that you're hitting, whether it's like test scores or
Mhm.
Cold
sales
Harbor,
numbers or
Cold
whatever.
Harbor, bro.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, see, Cam, you're giving away spoilers
No,
for
it's
season
I
two.
already put the spoiler alert on, bro. We can go in. We can go in.
Okay.
They were working on Cold
Remy,
Harbor. They were working on
are you,
Cold Harbor since day one, bro. Everybody's got to wake up. If they don't got, if that's a spoiler, I don't know what to tell them.
okay. Are you caught up, Remy?
I haven't watched episode 9,
Yeah,
the one that
Okay.
like just
You're
came
fine.
out.
Okay. I haven't
Cold
watched
Harbor
that one
is
either.
the name of the thing that they've been put.
We just found that out, but yeah, it's like
I'm just sensitive, bro, to like
yeah,
where people
We
could
didn't
be
find
at when they
no,
listen
but
to
we didn't
this.
find out what it is still. But it's on the computer. It says Cold Harbor, and that's what you know.
oh, it says Will Harbor.
Yeah.
Okay, got you. Yeah,
Anyway,
Okay.
but yeah,
That
KPIs. Yes,
anyway,
yes.
anyway. So yeah, so I think like it's interesting like tracing that and how like to your point, and I was totally on that wavelength, Remy, of like how in these groups we say, oh, we're family, right? And like to your point, Cam, like we create like all these like ERGs, resources, and free food, and all these things to make you feel really comfortable in this place. I'm not against like any of those things. Like I
Yeah,
love those perks. I
yeah,
love like ERGs are important, all those different things. But I think it creates this false sense of like security and community when at
yeah,
the end of the day it's a business. And when the numbers turn south,
yeah,
like it's you're gonna see the reality of that business.
yeah.
And so you're not, and it actually create, not only does it create an environment where it's hard to actually grieve, it actually creates more grief because it's established this expectation of like of safety and all these different things, and then you get let down in like a really hard way. But then you know, clearly the flip side is also like people coming in with their grief, with their experiences, and uh, and I think what's interesting, I mean, the whole, I guess, narrative of the show is like feeling like somehow cutting off from that grief is somehow like healing. And I'm sure we're gonna unpack that a bunch, but like, yeah.
yeah,
Anyway, I think like
But
both sides are really interesting.
just to stay on the. I know we're gonna get on the
yeah.
grief side, but let's just
Yeah,
stay on the corporation
Yeah, let's
side for
keep
a
it
quick
there.
second, and just
yeah,
how, as a boss, right? Like I run my own company now. I have staff now. I completely understand why a corporation would want to have severed workers. I
for
don't
sure.
want to. I don't want you to bring. I don't. Nobody wants to hear about that. I didn't hire you to hear about all your stuff. I just want you to do the work. But yet, I'm this dude who's trying to care and trying to. And I'm like, that's actually not that good for business. It'd be nicer if you just left your grief at home and came here and did the job. So it almost makes it from a corporate standpoint. They're like, yeah, I want you to be. I don't want to be this place for you. It's annoying to them, right? Right. This is why corporations are so excited about AI and robotics. Being able to like they can clean.
Automation.
You could
Yeah,
do everything. They don't never need a day off. It's like to care about the humanity, and that's difficult. As Black folks, we deal with that a lot, right? Like we deal. I mean, in 2020, it was difficult coming to work.
100%.
It was difficult coming to work. And there were times when I felt like I didn't know the concept of severed, but it was just like, gosh, I'm watching these other people and they're able to just do work. And I'm like, so I have to be worse at my job because, you know what I mean? So I'm just like, stop. Doesn't matter. Focus. Get your job done. Otherwise, you're gonna mess around and lose your job over something that happened in Minnesota. Like this. But and I was lucky. I had a job that talked about it and brought us all in and did all that. But I'm sure there were moments when they were like, okay, all right, don't we think this is kind of enough? Can we get productivity happening here? You know what I mean? So like, I don't know.
Yeah,
It's a real. This is just a real challenge, and I think almost exposes the reality of the relationship
Yeah.
between corporations and their employees.
Well, yeah, and I think, yeah, it's a crazy thing to think about how we as people have slowly given away our freedoms. I think about even the phone we have. Like Edward Snowden gave up his like citizenship, is now living in some, shack in Russia. I don't know where he's at, but he's, to just to expose that our phones and we're being monitored all the time. And now everybody knows that and we don't even care because, we'd rather have a nice phone and like we don't really mind that much. We're okay with it. And it's kind of maybe like the boiling frog analogy in terms of like the slowly warming up the water and we're just like, okay, we're in it now. Don't really know we're getting boiled. But I think it reminds me of the show in Lumen too, because they're literally giving up even their consciousness, at least, or at
Mm,
least like their conscious being part of it to an
yeah.
organization, right? And it's, at what cost do we what cost does it come that we give so much of ourselves to work to different organizations? And you could think of this in terms of government or even bigger, but it is really interesting, and it's obviously a lot of problems come from it, but yeah,
Mhm.
I don't know. And it's cool that you had a company that you could talk about stuff with. And I've had various companies. I feel like, I'm kind of,
It's good and bad.
yeah, yeah. I've,
It's
I'm kind of my own boss now, but I work with somebody that owns the company, but I'm an independent contractor, but he's a Christian dude, and I feel like we can chop it up. We pray before, and even Rem, I know you bring some spiritual aspects into
Mhm.
your job. So even if yeah,
Yeah.
it's still maybe not appropriate for someone to come in and bring all their baggage in all the time. But I think you also leave space for people to be able to keep it real. And I don't know if you're leading prayers necessarily, but that kind of thing is really helpful. I think to even get my mind in a place where I can contribute, even in the
Yeah.
midst of struggle of what I'm going through on any day to
Yeah.
day. So I don't know.
yeah. Well, yeah, what I was gonna jump in on is like similar experience to Remy, right? Middle of the pandemic, so much going on, like feeling a lot. And so like on one level, like wanting to have some sense of community feedback, like y'all see this, right? Like I'm not the only one feeling this, experiencing this. But then on another level, then it was like, dang, like now, like I was a part of this like Black ERG group, and now we're talking about it all the time, and now I gotta like, you
Yeah.
know, be the representative for Black people in these different conversations, and now I'm thinking about it all the time at work, and it's like, man, I just wish I could just show up and not have to think about this, and just do my
Severance,
job.
baby.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's,
Yeah.
and just, I mean, that's like the thing. I mean, obviously I can't relate to that exactly, but I think they're relating to this. I think everyone can relate to the fact they wish they were severed in some way, whether to get the work done or to get home or, and so it's interesting because the plot, it kind of tripped me out when I was thinking about it because most people want to escape from work, but some people do escape to work, you know. And I think that's
Yeah.
And
that's kind of both. There's both things going on in the show. So
yeah, and that's what I was trying to highlight is like on one hand, like just thinking about our current context and like world, not thinking about the separate world, but like on one hand, like you want to feel a sense of community to an extent, where like I can bring, if I'm dealing with something, like I want to be able to like deal with it. But on the other hand, it's like I don't want to have to deal with something because and like sometimes it's really nice just to be like, man, okay, like in this zone, like I'm just work Nate,
Yeah.
and there is
Right. Right.
part of that, there is something that is healing. Like clearly the extreme is what the show is
Right.
showing,
Right.
and like
Right.
that's definitely not healthy. But
Right.
there is something to being able to just show up in a space and just like do, and not have to
Yeah.
like constantly have your emotions at the forefront of
right.
like your mind.
No.
Well, especially when those emotions haven't been dealt with, right? Especially when you haven't healed.
Yeah.
Showing up healed is great, but when you got junk going on, like I'm about to have a baby like tomorrow, if I show up in a couple of weeks and I'm tired, nobody cares that I'm tired. There's certain things that are so personal, and I think there's probably
Mm,
nothing more personal than grief. It's kind of the most it's one of the deepest experiences emotionally that like even in your personal life no one can really understand, and you have a hard time wanting to talk about with people, right? Like this the classic. We had a real serious experience, serious loss in our family a couple years ago, um, and folks didn't want to talk about it. Like the person who was closest to it hasn't told people to this day. You know, certain
Mm.
people they don't want to talk about it, and part of it is just it's so annoying to have people respond in various ways to your deep grief, right? Like some people could respond like, let's say somebody really didn't care. They're like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry to hear that." Okay, so we're gonna keep it pushing to the meeting agenda because we got 30
Yeah.
minutes. You know what I mean? So there's that side, which was just hurtful and harmful. And then there's like the, oh my gosh, yeah, like my dog died too. You know, it's like, okay, this wasn't a dog, but all right. Or my grandma too. And it's like, no, it's a different grandma, different relationship. You know, it's so
Yeah.
difficult. So you don't want to bring it, but it's there. You know, it's there and it's deep and it's hurting.
Yeah.
So I don't know, man. I think in terms of why the corporation designed the severance,
Yeah.
experience makes sense, and then why people opt into it
Yeah.
makes sense, even if you just tie it down to this concept of grief and why no one really wants grief entering the workspace.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. I don't think I
Yeah,
saw it from the corporation side in the show. That's interesting. Because the plot is really interesting. Because the severance, the reality of the innie, like it's the innie and the outie. Like there's an interesting connection there because the innie's not completely severed when you think about it because they play on that too. Where Mark, I think it's one of the early episodes, Cobell asks him. I think she's like, "Are you look hungover?" But he just, but he clearly wasn't drinking because
Mhm.
he's an idiot. But there's this, it's this kind of
right.
constant loop,
Mm.
which actually one of the
The
episodes,
physical
yeah, one of the
is
episodes
on the
is named Loop or something.
Funny.
There's a half loop, but there's this subconscious that's leaking into the other self, the other consciousness, right? From the innie to the outie, from the outie to the innie, and even like physical stuff, right? Like Helly tried to commit suicide inside, and then her outie's
right,
got the bruises. So
right.
there's a lot going on there. But it makes me think about how you can't fully, like just in real life, our work self is still ourself. And so there's never, even though, we would like that procedure, I guess, in some ways,
Yeah,
we're never
right.
fully,
Mhm.
even if there was a
Can't.
procedure, you're never fully, can't cheat that, I guess. And that is kind of cool. It
Yeah.
like, it makes me want to, it's encouraging in the sense that I think the point of it is to show how much we really do need to grieve. And that's part of the thing that is going to come out.
Hmm.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Hmm.
and I think the other thing, even just the examples you use, right? So like Mark being hungover as an outie, and then his innie experiencing
Yeah.
that, and then Helly trying to commit suicide, and then her outie experiencing that. To me, it highlights the embodied reality, right? Like we think of our like we live in this post-enlightenment era where we're just like brains on legs, like and that's how we think about ourselves. But
Yeah.
like there's a whole embodied reality in our grief, our emotions reside in our body. And so regardless of how we try to trick ourselves mentally, unless we deal with it and truly are healing, like that reality is going to show up in our body, subconsciously in ways that we don't realize until it comes out.
Right. Or until we have to reintegrate with a procedure that then
Yeah.
so it's like that's crazy too
Yeah.
because that's also traumatic. I think there's something deep there. I haven't fully thought this out, but I think even that procedure being something that conjures up all the old feelings and memories for him, and now he's seeing his wife, and I don't know. I think there's just so much.
So many
No,
spoilers
dude, the
from season
spoiler
two,
alert
man.
has already been rung.
Why?
The spoiler alert has
Oh
no, we're not.
man!
The spoiler's not an issue, but this is something I
Wait,
wanted
Mark S's wife is still alive?
to. So. But it does bring up this concept. So when I think about heaven and hell and this concept of hell, it's interesting because the first episode in season one is titled "Good News About Hell," and I think there is this interesting interplay between the two topics that we're riffing on in terms of corporate. kind of oppressive corporate structures, but also just corporations and business in general, and then our own personal grieving, because it's interesting because hell is this. There's a quote I want to read in a little bit, but there's this. I don't know how to say it. Like you look at humanity's attempt to create utopia, and you look at even the biblical example, it's like Babel, right? They're trying to create a tower to heaven, but it fails every time. And I think the modern corporation and tech is our attempt at kind of creating these little mini utopias, but it really just doesn't
Mm-hmm.
work. And I think that's what, Lumen kind of represents. It's this like culty kind of church like thing. And it's on the outside, it's this great
Hmm.
business, but really there's all this sinister stuff going on underneath, in the basement, and
Yeah. Yeah.
so that's kind of
Mm-hmm.
crazy. And sadly, I think, church is another thing, but like that can be great. But I think people often go to religion for this promise of purpose and something
Percent.
higher. But that's
Yeah.
really found in God and realized in community. But often people can put the cart before the horse in all these ways. And even in business, right? They try to do this, we've Nate actually, I remember you talking about a business that you were in back in the day. It was a famous one. I don't want to mention it, but there's documentaries about it. Yeah, I know the one you,
Yeah.
and it's like that was like compared to a cult. So there's all these weird kind of connections between church and corporations and modern corporations,
Yeah.
and
For sure.
and I think they're trying to manufacture this like utopia or this
Yeah.
heaven. What do you want to say? Um,
Mm,
but in the
mm,
industry, it doesn't really work that way. And I think we manufacture our own versions of heaven that often feel more like hell, ironically. And just a quote I want to put out, and I want you guys to think whatever you guys think about this that comes to mind. But I've been reading C.S. Lewis, The Problem of Pain, and it's really the problem of evil, the problem of evil, which is all, some people call it the problem of pain, some people call it the problem of evil. The question that's like, okay, if God's so good, why is there suffering? And this question came up from a
Mm-hmm.
coworker actually recently. Um, but C.S. Lewis has a good quote in his book. It says, "What is outside the system of self-giving is," well, and just to preface this kind of threw me off. Nobody sells self-giving anymore. Self-giving is like self-giving of oneself, sacrifice, that kind of thing. So what is outside the system of self giving is not earth, nor nature, nor ordinary life, but simply and solely hell. Yet even hell derives from this law. If we could suppose a single soul that had been created and then left utterly to itself, that soul would be in hell. For in the whole universe, there is nothing that belongs to itself. All things are by nature receivers and in their turn givers. Nothing can enter the stream of divine love which does not partake of that pattern. Man did not invent this law. It is the order which was before the world and will be after all worlds have ended. And I thought that was super deep. And just to kind of maybe say it succinctly, because Dostoevsky said something similar in his book, The Brothers Karamazov, he said, "What is hell? I maintain that it is suffering of being unable to love." And so,
mm.
we need to be able to give of ourselves, and if we're trying to constantly avoid pain or avoid grief, that's the opposite of giving of ourselves and loving, right? Because you can't truly
Yeah.
love if you're selfish and afraid. And that's exactly why people don't want to grieve or feel pain, right? Because it's fear, and fear has to do with punishment or avoidance of potential hurt or pain. And so when we don't properly feel whatever's there, then we're going to harden up. We're not going to be able to give that out. And so that kind of tripped me
Yeah.
out in light of this whole episode, or just this whole show, and kind of thinking about, oh, this is like they're creating their own hell, but but yet it's trying to be like they're acting like it's some like cult church
Yeah.
like great experience. The whole Egan and whatever, and praise
Hmm.
Kier and all this,
Mm-hmm.
but it's really like terrible. So that was super
Hmm.
deep to me too.
There's a lot to respond to. I mean, one of the things, going back to like church and this connection between how corporations feel and probably how churches feel is that like you we all kind of have this temptation to develop a vision of how things ought to be, and we get attached to that vision, and that vision usually is some utopia where everything is organized perfectly, people are just
Mm-hmm.
doing what they need to do, and then what gets in the way, You know, like you have an idea for how this podcast was going to flow, and what gets in the way? People bringing
People.
their own junk, and like, bro, no, you're messing up. So there, I think, is a very natural temptation when you have a desire for something good, and you've worked out how the pieces are supposed to play out. It's
Mhm.
hard to let people be themselves. It's hard to deal with the fact that the real beauty comes in you can't control it. Like it's better to just let things go, but we want to put it in a box. And the minute we start to try to control stuff is the minute it starts being coming like hell for folks. And corporations feel that. Churches, I think, fall victim to that consistently, where they just don't want to allow folks to be their individuals,
And our individual
and
self, I mean, that's what fear is, right? We want to control things, even in our own. We want to control the amount of pain that's coming into our heart or in our mind, and you really can't do that. In fact, and then in when we
Mhm.
try to do that, it only creates more pain, ironically. And I think that's a
yep.
huge theme in the show and what you're hitting on.
Yep, and the last thing I'll say is that was when you were talking, it just reminded me of Mark S. Like he did the severance thing, right? To try to escape from that. So like at least 8 hours, I could not be feeling this just incredible pain.
Mhm.
But then you come back and your life is a wreck. It just looks so unattractive. I thought they just did such a great job, even with lighting and all these different things. It just looks so dark and dreary, and he lives alone, and everything's just the same. And he comes home and he cannot escape this deep, deep pain. And so, set work became like a drug where he can escape, obviously drinking. And then you just mentioned like the loneliness of it. And you kind of want to be alone, but then that's like the worst thing for you to do. And you start creating these like you look at him and he's in these kind of two versions of hell. One that looks really, really like deep and raw and real, and one that looks really contrived and created,
Mhm.
but both are just like, dang, all day. Both versions. That ain't it, brother. You're gonna have to deal with your grief, man. No
Yeah.
escaping it.
Well, and the irony of the plot too is interesting because it's like if you're trying to sever this, I just have to say this is the only like hole in the plot, but maybe it is the point, and we kind of hit on this earlier, is like he's severing because he doesn't want to feel, 8 hours a day, like you're saying. But really, it to a severed reality, he's just coming right back to himself, right? So he doesn't get any other reality. So it's like he really isn't
Right.
escaping. And I think maybe that is kind of the point that even he's trying to, it almost makes it worse because now his whole reality in that consciousness reality
Mm.
is all pain. So there's no work escape
That's
really.
deep.
So anyway, that was interesting to me when I started thinking about it. I'm like, wait, that would actually suck. You're just perpetuating this because that's what the innie feels too. It's just like they wake up, they're right back in the elevator, like that's all they get. So that's just a trip to think about. So maybe we don't want severance is my point.
Yeah, it's funny. I never thought about that, but yeah, you're right. His Audi's reality is just nothing but pain
Yeah.
and the
Mhm.
never-ending day of pain. That's that's
And
crazy.
maybe that's the point is you can't really escape it, in all attempts, you're just going to make it worse. And I think that's true, at least in my experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I
so
thought Nate, I thought you had something else to
yeah,
say.
Oh no, I didn't know. I mean, I think you guys like touched on a lot there and kind of communicated it really well. So I was just listening. But yeah, I mean, I think like on that idea of control and that idea of like having a perfect vision and yeah, people are always the thing that, destroy that vision. And so then you have a choice to make, like are you a a slave, for lack of a better word, to like your vision, and therefore you're going to at any cost like try and like realize that vision, or do you learn how to work within reality as it is, to find like yeah, to still realize like it is the vision like the I don't know, like emotional reality of like unity and community and all this stuff, or is the vision a specific process and order and structure? And if it's that, then like
Hmm.
it's gonna
Yeah.
it's gonna become to that hellish environment. And it's interesting even just thinking about like, yeah, because funny, like we do often depict hell as this dark place, right? Like at least culturally. But yeah, Lumen is hell, but it's this like very bright,
Very bright.
like
Well, rather
Yeah.
fake.
bright,
Yeah.
like
Fake, man.
overexposed. Like, yeah,
Man, maybe fake, maybe fakeness is hell,
Right.
you know, where you can't be who you are. You can't be your authentic self. That's tough, man. That's tough.
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, it's like that Dostoevsky quote. It's like hell isn't fire, but it's that self-inflicted inability to give or receive love, like C.S. Lewis was talking about too. And their whole reality is like this. It's interesting too, because in the any side, like in their whatever you call it, hell and lumen, whatever, they're also experiencing now pain and all this stuff. It's just a different now the innies got their own baggage,
Mhm.
like with
that's
and
true.
like Dylan and
Yeah.
all that. Like now he gets to see
Yeah.
his wife on the outside. There's all these different things, and Harry and
Man.
Mark kind of fall in
But you
love,
know,
but it's
hey,
you know,
bro, I have to interrupt you
yeah,
because you just made me think about Dylan. And he brings his storyline brings a really interesting element to this because his wife gets to see both sides,
Yeah.
you know? And so she's watching her Audi husband not deal with some deep junk, something, whether it's just like anxiety or just like this lack of self-worth or just this feeling of feeling like a failure and just watching him not grieve that loss of probably vision of who he was, and he's just turned into this shell of a man who just brings low energy, does the bare minimum, and she's like, ugh, coming into and then I'm curious what it's gonna expect because now she's saying, oh
You,
man, I'm
she's like falling
experiencing
in
him
love
with,
with his innie.
yeah, she's like, I like this version, man. And now she feel like she's cheating, you know what I'm saying? Which I just think is a very interesting element, man, to grief, which is how people who we love experience us when we haven't dealt with our grief. You know, like Mark S is just we're finally in episode 6, 7, 8 getting to see Mark before, right, with his wife and
Mm,
how
yeah.
much life he had and how much fun he was. So you start to see from the perspective of his sister, dang, like that used to be my brother. He had a good sense of humor and he was fun and light, and now he's just dark and just
man,
not
that's
it.
deep.
You know
I
what I
feel
mean?
like what you're talking about is trippy because and deep because it's the interplay of everybody's undealt with grief, and I think that is what life is, right? Everybody's there's so many interactions we have on a day to day, and we don't know what someone's really going through. And obviously, in the spousal relationship, I hope you would, but it's like you said, she's seeing this kind of degradation of her husband and this conformity and this, you know, shell of a man or shell of who he could be. And that's sad because that's like played out like where it is, and then she sees maybe who he could be because the innie is like
Mhm.
the innocent self,
He's
at least
super
at once. Yeah,
confident.
there's not all that baggage, and there's still hope and all these different things. But yeah, it's interesting that, man, I just think it's so deep. Relationships and life is crazy because that's like that saying, hurt people. But I also heard recently, heal people, heal people, you know? And I thought that
Like
was
that.
Okay.
cool because I think it really does. You are going to affect people, you know, and I think we can think that it's just affecting us or something. We don't deal with our junk,
Mhm.
but really
Mhm.
you're rubbing off on folks all the time. It's just a thing, and people feel your energy and they feel your emotion or lack thereof, and it really and I think that goes back to the those quotes I've been saying. It's this inability to love. It's this disconnection, and we're not. That's not really who we are. We're not supposed to be these fearful people that are imprisoned, on our own prison we fashion for ourselves. But really, we're supposed to be not living in fear, and that's the beauty
Right.
of Christ, right? And what He's given us is that freedom to be able to feel everything. Jesus was able to feel. He was able to grieve and weep out loud,
Mhm.
and yet. he had joy and all those things, but he was able to love fully. But I think we're so guarded as a society and as men and as women too, and it's
Hmm.
just it causes so much more pain. And I think if we were able to really heal and and feel that love, we could give a lot more of that away and without
Hmm.
reservation.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Jesus came to heal the sick, right? Like that's his whole thing is I want you to be whole and healed. And we all have some element of hurt, that we need to heal from, some trauma, either
Hmm.
small t or big T, that like if you don't deal with it, it's not going anywhere, and we can sometimes feel like here's our two choices: either front, you know, like just put on a front, and you know the spaces where you pretty much no one cares and no one needs all that junk. Just be, and work is a place like that. Everything becomes a place like that, and then you come home and you're the real hurt self, and so then your house gets just the authentic unhealed version of you, and everybody else gets the fake
Hmm.
version of you, and folks, it's just like, dang, is this the two dualities we have to live between, right? And that's what Mark S is. Either you're this fake guy who the heck is Mark S, or you're the real Mark who still ain't dealt with his junk, you know.
Mm.
Um, and that's a there's a third option, you know. The third option is to heal, right? The third
Yeah.
option is to heal, and then I think the question becomes, how do I heal?
Right.
And that is, I think, where Jesus comes should come in for
Mm.
everybody.
Yeah, and that
Yeah.
example too of even like I think about Psalm 34, the righteous cry out and the Lord hears them, he delivers them from all their troubles. The Lord is near to the brokenhearted and saves the crushed in spirit. I think that being able, especially us as men, I think the ability to cry out, the ability to, I think that's the humility and the where Jesus comes into the picture is asking for help, asking that, not being proud and not being hardened or putting up a front to be like, oh, I'm good. But no, like tell somebody, tell God ultimately too, cry out about these things and not just hold it all inside because the body does keep the score and all that stuff. And I think, yeah, so I'm with you 100%.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that line. The body keeps the score. I'm gonna use that somewhere else. But I think what you guys are also hitting at is just again that whole idea of like our vision of utopia or heaven or like perfection and how like expectation setting um, and this feeling like, oh, like this grief, this pain is an interruption in my life, right? And this shouldn't be. And so I shouldn't have to deal with this. And we come up with all our different coping mechanisms. And I think what I've been I guess realizing more recently is like I think we do that with scripture as well, right? Like we can read scripture in a really like specific way where we have a certain set of expectations or um, whatever that make it so that we have a really hard time like seeing the reality of what God's like plan is. And I think just one example of that for me is just like just going back to the garden. I don't know if this will connect with everybody, but I think typically when I think of like the garden, Genesis 1 through 3, I think of like utopia. Like this is the world as it should have been, right? We have this whole narrative of the fall, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's
Mm-hmm.
this perfect reality, then we sinned, and now we have the world that we live in now, right?
Mm-hmm.
But what's
Mm-hmm.
really interesting about like how specifically in Genesis 3 when we're talking about the garden, there's two things that blow up that idea of perfection. One is a snake, right? So like, what the heck? Like, why is there this thing that's in
Yeah.
rebellion, right?
Mm.
But then the other thing too is like the whole thing that God says is that if you eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, you will die, right? And so like the fact that there is death
Mm.
in like
Hmm.
why is it
Hmm.
even like a part of like this
Mm.
reality with God,
Yeah.
that there is this the tree of life, right? Like a tree of life, well, like if this is heaven and utopia, you should always be alive. Like why would you need a tree of life, and then why is there a tree that ultimately like represents death because you eat of its fruit and you'll die? And so it's
Mm.
like anyway, I guess my whole point is like sometimes we can like I think in reading scripture we can
Yeah.
think that there being with God means there's nothing wrong going on.
Hmm.
But
Mm.
clearly
Yeah.
there's a lot
There's
It's
always
a
that,
part of
of
the
room.
story.
there's always that
It's part of
snake
the
in the
story.
grass, yeah, and there's always fruit that looks deceptively good, but it maybe really isn't. And I think, yeah, you're completely right. It's not. That is the.
And yeah, and what was kind of the there were choices for Adam and Eve, you know, when they were tempted, they could have run to God and said, "Yo, like this dude told us, or this snake told us that I'm confused." Instead, they went with it, and then they did it, and were dealing with guilt and shame, and as opposed to coming clean, they lied and hid more. I think that there's something to like. I wonder what would have happened if they just said, "God, I messed up, man. I
Mm,
messed up."
Yeah.
And we know God is a God of full of compassion, slow to anger, all these things. It's like, what could have happened if they just realized that, hey, maybe messing up is a part of the human experience. Maybe like to your point, suffering is a part of it. And God said when he created all this that it was good. So if
mhm.
suffering is a part of it, then is suffering good
Mm.
and not something to kind of escape, but to actually like help you realize something deeper about life, and what a relationship with God could be. I mean, how many people talk about how much closer they got?
Mhm.
Like people talk about that certain traumas, they're glad it happened. You know what I mean? Because of what it's turned,
Yeah.
what has helped them see. And you know who's interesting in Severance that we haven't talked about yet? Rickon.
Oh,
His
yes.
wife,
Yeah. The
he's
husband, the
like
Oh
book
I thought
writer.
he
yeah.
was kind of corny dude at first, and then like he started dropping some bars. Many times he like had so he basically challenged that in Mark S at like one of the dinners or something like that. Like basically you're trying to run from this, but like there's something here. There's something deeper here that if you actually go through it and experience it, you know, you'll you'll realize something better
You'll
about it.
realize
So I don't
the
know.
you
Yeah.
are. Like,
Right, exactly. Right? Which is like real
Exactly.
self-helpy and like it
yeah,
was kind of corny for a
It's
while.
guru.
And then like the innie read that book and was like,
yeah,
oh,
yeah.
this
There's
is
so much
kind of
there.
deep, bro.
No, there's so much there. I think no, I like what you guys are saying about the garden. I do think, yeah, it wasn't. I've come to that understand. I don't know who was talking about that recently, if it was Tim Mackey, but I think I heard some of what you probably heard, Nate, about that was a realization for me that, oh, the garden wasn't this perfect place.
Mm,
But also, I don't
mm,
know if there was suffering yet, but it was on the table, maybe. But I think that maybe came after the curse. But
mm.
to your point, I do think there's still good that can come of it. Not that that's always a simple answer or explanation, but
Right,
I do think there's something
right.
to learn in our pain, and that is the common experience. That is why this podcast is titled "We All Suffer," because we do. And I think, what do we do with that reality? And like, I like your thought experiment, Rem, about what would have happened if they would have been vulnerable with the wrong that they did and didn't hide. And yeah, it's super interesting because, but it's so instructive, right? That this is us. This is what we do. We do hide. We want to blame
Yeah.
shift. And it really is instructive. The Bible is so deep about grief. It really talks about, like, this is the human experience.
Mhm.
This is okay. This is how we handle hard things or shame or emotions of any kind. And these are these there's different options out there, but it's helpful to see these stories and learn from them. And I think that's obviously why they're there. But I also like, I mean, hopefully we can do more one-offs like this with you guys where, we do just break down some art, because I think something about seeing it on a screen or observing somebody else experience, especially even in a crazy sci-fi show that's extreme in a lot of ways, but it really illustrates a lot of reality in more
Hmm.
ways than just us having a conversation. Maybe like art does that in a way. So I think this will be a ongoing conversation with more, maybe break down a song or whatever as they come up. But Severance was just, I've been wanting to talk about this for a minute. So I appreciate you guys coming on. I want to be respectful of your time too, because I know we hit an hour
Yeah.
and
All right, last thing,
yeah,
last thing. The only other thing we didn't talk about here, unless we get to it some
go
other
for it.
time, is
Remy got notes.
is Gemma.
Oh yeah,
You know what I mean? Like, and because it was, it's she and I haven't seen the last one, so I really do need to think. I really need to watch that to see because they keep going back and revealing more. But um,
yeah. We should end on
she,
theories too of like what are
she was
theories.
having she was having miscarriages. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
And just that grief is so real, right? And
yeah.
didn't I don't know how she got because I know she got into a car crash. Did it say in episode 9 like how
Well,
she
You'll have
what happened
the
before? Oh,
that's
my
like
fault. She
the
didn't. Oh, my fault. She didn't
what
because she alive. My fault.
well, we
See,
don't know.
I actually don't know how
we
she
don't
ended up.
We
know.
don't know how that was
Yeah.
faked or what happened yet. We're still not sure. But
We're not sure, but remember, like there was a disconnect between the two of them about how she was
oh
experiencing real grief and he wasn't really
right.
getting it.
Exactly. And then she was going to some event, and then that's the night in which she
Nice. Nice.
died.
Right.
Oh,
Or
okay.
dipped out
Okay.
because he wasn't. Yeah.
Or dipped out. You see what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
it's another little layer right there
Oh, for
of
sure.
grief, man. And that's death is obviously kind of the most relatable grief. Like everybody's gonna experience. You're gonna experience that, um, unless you die before you experience that. Like death, you're gonna experience death and the grief of death.
Yeah,
But also, like,
for
there's
sure.
these other little things. When you lose a job or a divorce, or um, what that does for kids when they have grief over the loss of their home situation,
Hmm.
or miscarriages, and that's one of those things that like you don't talk about really,
Mm.
right? And it's hard to process, and even in your home, you might not experience the relief or healing from that. So anyway, no, I agree with you, man, that this is I'm seeing it even through this conversation. There's I could have pointed out some different themes here, but all of this is kind of coming like, yeah, grief is a this desire in all of us to escape it and wanting to create systems where we don't have to deal with it,
Hmm.
um, is our human nature. But these ways of dealing with it actually make things worse.
Yeah. It's funny. So I know we were supposed to
No,
end,
you're good. We
and
keep
then
it
you brought
going.
up Gemma, and then
Right.
think like now I'm like thinking more about the different characters, because at first like all I thought about was like Mark
Right.
and his grief, and I was like, okay, oh Dylan, yeah, I can see that, but it's like yeah, every single character has something, right? And so like clearly Gemma, I forgot about that,
Yeah.
and that's kind of like the domino that put them both on this journey, and somehow they're at Lumen. But even Miss Cobell, right? Like this woman who you hate,
Miss
and
Cobell.
Yeah. No.
and then she's got stuff in her
Yeah.
past.
And then even
He got
yeah.
stuff.
And I don't think Remy's even seen the latest one because I think it goes. Well, actually, that was the last one. You saw it
That
together.
was
That was the last one. I
Yeah.
saw her whole backstory.
Yeah.
That was like,
She was like,
oh
yeah,
shoot,
she
she
was
came
like
from the
a
middle of America.
child labor worker, something like crazy. Yeah, and Irving too. I mean, there's some military background thing, or his dad was military, and there's some
hmm
kind of escapism going on there. Yeah, I mean, Milchek is hard to. We
Helly,
don't know Milchek's story.
Helly, just think about Helly R. She
Yeah,
dealing with not Helly R,
no,
the
but
actual
yeah,
Helen
Helen
Egan.
Egan.
yeah,
Like
Yeah.
Helena Egan, she dealing with something
Oh
too.
no, for
yeah.
sure. Well, there's an.
We don't know about Brother Milchek.
Yeah, we don't know.
What's his story
We
yet?
don't know Milchek's story.
That brother
Well,
got some deep
he's
cut
st
too.
he's starting to crack. Like those little interactions with that fake girl
Yeah.
who always has the earpiece.
Right.
Oh yeah, that
Where he's trying to connect with her,
He
and
was
she's
trying to
just
connect
like,
about, hey, black, like sister, like, wasn't that kind of, did you get them paint too? She was like, "Hmm, don't mess up my job." Oh, shoot. We could do it. Oh, we could do a whole thing on
I
that.
know. I was actually
oh,
wondering if
for
you guys were
real.
gonna bring that up because that scene made me think about y'all. I was like, man, this is crazy.
Yeah, you try to feel out like who's gonna keep it a buck,
Yeah.
who
Yes.
is real and who's not, and then you bring a little something in, you're like, never mind,
Yep.
you're one of them.
Which is also like real about corporate structure, right? It's like,
Yes,
yeah.
yes.
No,
I
this
mean,
is
we don't
deep.
talk a whole lot about just the grief of being black in America and what you got to deal with on a consistent basis, and of history and what that experience is like working in a place where you don't feel like you can bring your full cultural self, on top of course, just everybody's individual purpose, um, personal grief and stuff like that. So no, there's a lot to be dug into, man. I'm sure an hour is not enough
No,
to cover
seriously,
all of
it's
it. But
deep. I mean, we can keep talking if you guys want. We can go in on that if you want. I don't know. You guys have kids, so I'm like, I'm being
My kid's
sensitive.
not here.
Oh yeah, you're
It's
on.
really,
Yeah, I forgot. You're free for today.
I
oh,
am.
your kid left.
My Adiel and Javier in Kentucky
Yeah.
visiting family. So
Oh,
just
nice,
me.
nice, nice.
Well,
Yeah.
we can end on. I mean, if you guys want to go in on that, we can. But we could also end on like any theories we might have about the show. That might be a good way to end it,
Mm,
just to think about. Like, I don't know.
mhm,
I don't know. Outside of maybe that there's some kind of mind control. The Cold Harbor thing maybe is them like
mm,
trying to map people's minds or something because they're like feeling out numbers and maybe they're
Yeah.
checking brain waves and they're gonna like try to sever the whole world or do something crazy with it. I don't know, some kind of control scheme, but I have
For
no
sure.
idea. I really don't, but we could call it now because this episode will air hopefully before the end episode so we can.
well, I think no, no, no. Here's my thought. I think what Lumen is trying to do, I don't know what they're really trying to do, but one element of what they're trying to do is present this vision to the world that this is really great. Like this is actually how it should be. That these folks are not just um, traumatized folks who are trying to escape their trauma, but like, no, they're look, we sent our own daughter in there and she's loving it and thriving, right? Like this should be for everyone. Now, what they're really like, what the real ultimate motive of that, I don't have a theory on, but I do think that we got a taste of the fact that they were going to get exposed. Like folks are trying to expose them, and it almost happened, and then they recovered.
Mm-hmm.
But like,
PR
I
spin.
don't know how many. I don't know how many different seasons they're going to go into, and that kind of depends on how deep they want to go down
I
these little
know.
rabbit holes. But
I
like,
almost hope they don't
you
keep
know,
it going more than it should. I feel like sometimes
I know, just end it right, but just like getting exposed, man. Getting exposed when you try to create these systems and sell people on a way things should be that doesn't include them being their full selves, it's not gonna work, and it should get exposed.
yeah, it'll be
And
ugly.
then when junk get
Yeah.
exposed, that's great, man.
Talk
Like
about
we learn from it, and hopefully we build something better.
talk about corporate America though. I feel like they're gonna keep milking the profits of the show and doing another season, even if it
For
wasn't the
real.
original plan. They're just gonna keep going.
Oh,
They'll just
don't
keep the
fall off,
storyline
Because I
going.
even
man.
heard Courtney
They'll
Don't
be like,
fall
Courtney
off,
just told me
man.
they're doing a Ted Lasso season 4 or 5 or whatever. I'm just like, come on, we got that. That show's done now. We're done with Ted Lasso, but they know they can milk it.
Exactly. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I so I don't know where it's going in terms of what they're trying to do. Like for the longest, I thought that Gemma was actually dead, and they found some way to clone her. Because of like the lambs, and then when they showed up in that room with that crazy lady, and
She was
she
dead.
asked to see the belly button,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I was like, oh, they're trying to see if they were born of a woman or not, right? Like they're looking like, that's what I
Oh,
was
that's a
thinking
good
about.
point, actually. I didn't think about
Yeah.
that.
That's
Right.
good.
Which would explain like the goats and the sheep, right? Because that's what they traditionally clone.
Sweet
Yeah,
But
things,
facts.
bro.
yeah, but I don't know because it seems like Gemma's actually Gemma, but
Have you
like
ever talked to a clone
Right.
before? Okay. No, but that's real.
Yeah.
I think that actually is a good. Nah, I don't know how I messed. I just
I
completely
know. I think I
forgot.
just was like, some things they be doing. I'm just like, that's just weird, bro. But everything has a purpose, and I'm hoping they're gonna bring it all together.
Oh
This
yeah.
junk is hecka deep, you know. This junk is hecka deep, and I have a feeling that all of the interviews can't really go into what the full meaning of it is because it's not done yet, you know. So it's
Oh
like
yeah.
they would have to give some junk away to tie it all together. Like, what's the ultimate theme and what's the message here? You know, I'm curious where they're gonna go with it. Is it some like corporate boom, boom, boom? Is it some like deep American conspiracy theory that they try to, all the junk that's out there? Like, I hear you, man. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It'll be.
Cam, what's your
I
take?
mean, I just said mine's not that deep. It's just like they mind control like the whole world or something. Their cold harbor is them that they've been working on is something that's gonna they're gonna crack the case of the mind, and maybe it has something to do with cloning too.
Mm.
Maybe there's something there, but I have no idea. I'm not even gonna try to speculate on anything.
But I don't. I mean, okay. Well, I guess I'm just gonna keep speculating because like the innovation that they seem to have created with Gemma is that she can sever and go into different personalities in each room.
Is
Like,
it different
Why would they?
personalities or is it different? She's sever or well, she had different consciousness. Different. She's severing like 20
like I.
ways. Yeah,
That's what it
She's
seems to
never in
be.
20 different
or eight
ways?
different ways. However many doors there are in that one place. Yeah.
That's what it seemed
Right.
to me, right? But somehow she could still like. She was. They would ask her questions when she left the room
Well, they're
and
more
see what
asking her
she.
questions of how she feels after, because it's like a rem.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, but I think that's like the innovation is like that you instead of whatever the old school technology that Cobell came up with having to go down this elevator, like they can sever you more quickly and maybe put you in a different like headspaces and like
I didn't think about that, dude. I think that's exactly what's going on. I don't know why I didn't think about the fact that that's splitting way more than everybody else, and that's like a new experiment that they're. I don't know why I've been so slow on the show, bro.
But
My brain is like malfunctioning.
why did they get her? Like, did they that's I gotta figure out how they got her.
I think she
She didn't
volunteered,
yeah.
sign up
bro.
for that,
I think
bro.
she
You think
did.
she volunteered for
Dude,
that and
and
then
Nathan,
they set the car crash so that he would do it
well,
too?
you
And
volunteer
then
at
what's the
first.
issue? What's the thing between them though?
Yeah,
What
what's the
like
link?
why what's the link between them?
Between who? Between Gemma and Mark?
Between Mark S and
The
Gemma?
work
Like
that
why
Mark
are
is
they what are they
doing
looking
Oh, the
and
for, you
Cold
know?
Harbor. Well, we saw the door that Gemma didn't go in was the Cold Harbor door. You saw that, right?
for
And I
sure.
don't know what it is
Yeah.
either, but
What's the Cold Harbor door?
But
Woo-hoo!
but Rem, I think you're totally right. Like I do think in some ways she opted in, but like the doctor, I don't know if you noticed, like the doctor that's in Lumen is the same doctor. He shows up in like those flashbacks when they were in that whole scene when they had the baby. Yeah, he's in there.
what? I totally missed that, bro. Am I even watching this show right now? I feel like Nate's got all the insight. I
Yo!
must be severed when I'm watching
You
this show.
you guys have all the like spiritual deep insights. I just have like the show stuff.
But you figure, oh
I totally missed that,
shoot.
bro. I missed that completely.
Did he do that? Did he present that to her? So no, but let's stay here
Well,
for a
did he
quick second.
implant
If
her with
he
some kind?
presented that,
Did he?
why would what's the pitch to somebody who's
Well, no. Well, part
experiencing
of it, she was weak. Remember, like you were saying, like she was vulnerable because her and Mark's relationship was not cool at that point, and so maybe there was a proposal of, hey, you don't have to deal with this anymore. But maybe I don't know. Maybe they slipped her something when she was on the operating table. With, I don't know, or maybe they put something in her there. I have no idea. That's crazy.
was he trying to holler at her was he trying to holler at her one of her severed personalities? Was that him?
No,
He
he's
was like
Or that was that somebody
he
yeah.
else?
was her
He
Yes.
husband
was?
in the seventh
He was
in one
her
of those.
husband in one of them, right?
Yeah.
Right,
We going we
but then at the end, like when she attacked him, he had said that like Mark didn't love her, and then he it seemed like he was starting to come on to her right before she attacked him, and then tried to get out of there in the basement.
Right.
It is kind of like that. Yeah, he was telling some lies that Mark's remarried or something. Yeah, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that was a trip, dude. That show is
Hey,
so
this is not one you could just put on in the background, bro. And you can't fall asleep to it because I be falling asleep and then I try to figure out where I was at. You know what I'm saying? And then I come back and I'm like, wait, what was it? I gotta lock back in on this thing, bro. Y'all just made this way better. Because the Miss Cobell episode, I was like, what is going on, bro? Y'all drug this whole thing out for that. But I bet you Nate is gonna have something deep for that. No, you didn't see when she got the coffee and the throwing like oh
that did trip me out. They're all getting high and stuff. That episode,
Yeah.
yeah,
oh
that episode tripped me out. Every Yeah, some of it I think they're trying to drag out, but then some of it I'm like, maybe this is necessary. It'll all
oh
we'll all know. It depends how they tie this up in a bow or not, bro. If they keep
yeah
extending
yeah
it,
Yeah.
I'm gonna act like they've been making it up as they go. I'm just be like, come on, bro. We just doing this because you don't have a good ending. But I don't know. It could be great. It could be the best ending ever. But I'm a little worried. I'm a little worried how they're gonna
this
tie
is
it up.
let's just this isn't based on any book, right?
No,
This is them.
this
He
dude
made
wrote
this up.
No.
this. Yeah,
All right.
like some when he was working at a random door factory job,
Yeah.
which is actually smart.
Yeah, they got to wrap it up, man. They got to wrap it up. Hopefully, this is the last one. It comes to a close, and then make something else. If you
You
this good, then you can make something else.
you think this will be the last? There's no way this is the last season.
I think they're gonna keep going.
How many episodes is it?
It's 10 total.
There's 10.
So one more.
So yeah, they're not gonna end it this
Yeah,
season.
I think it.
Wrap it up. That's what I'm about these miniseries, bro. Netflix got it right.
I
Miniseries,
like
bro. Do
miniseries
it.
better too.
Be done.
It's like give me 8 episodes and we're done. Yeah,
Yeah, like to your point, Ted Lasso. I get it. He don't know how to coach. Move on, and he's happy. Move on, bro. No, they try to,
it
they
was
just try to
good.
make
It
it
was
deeper
good,
and
but
deeper.
yeah, there's a certain time where you just need to die, like as a show, like it needs to be done. But I think
Yeah.
because of the industry right now and the lack of original IP and stuff. But this was
Facts.
a
Netflix. Talk about Netflix, bro. Netflix is looming. No, I'm just playing. I'm just joking. Don't cancel us.
no, but this is good, man. Hey, I appreciate you guys coming on, man. We can
For
end it
sure.
there.